parents. I'm going to read from my notes because we're on a tight schedule, and if I don't read from my notes, I tend to talk a lot, so please forgive me. My name is Kathleen Halal, and I've been a resident of Irvine for 16 years. I first became interested in the subject of pesticides when my sons were diagnosed with autoimmune conditions. I started talking to farmers to learn about nutrition, and I learned about the effects that pesticides have on the animals. They were finding that the animals' health improved when they had feed without pesticides. So in order to bolster our children's health, our family switched over to a completely organic diet, and our boys' health improved. I started to notice that there was a lot of pesticide application going on around our schools. When I looked into it, even though the amounts were listed in ounces, I learned that those ounces become gallons. I started to visit with senior government scientists about the effects these chemicals could have on children. I learned that there is cause for concern. I was not alone in my worries about my children's health. This generation of kids is known as Generation RX. According to government figures, over 54% of children now have a chronic health condition. 1 in 24 boys is on the autism spectrum, and these numbers are climbing. In terms of toxins, medical experts are finding that our kids' buckets are full. It's very important that we start to pay attention to where they're being exposed to toxins and do our best to reduce their load. This slide shows, this is actually from a PTA meeting for Orange County schools, and it shows the increase in spending by the districts on special needs kids. You can see the sharp uptick. These kids need help. These costs to districts are for things like aids, sometimes wheelchairs, feeding tubes, special buses, and the districts are just going nuts trying to handle the uptick in children that have health problems. Over the past decades, the science typically used to determine whether products had a detrimental effect on us was toxicology. You may have heard people say that certain herbicides are less toxic than a cup of coffee. What they're talking about is acute exposure. However, a lot of the latest science is actually focusing on endocrinology, where scientists are looking closely at exactly how chronic exposure to synthetic chemicals is affecting human growth, development, and reproduction. What they're finding is that even in minute amounts, parts per billion or parts per trillion, these chemicals are having grave negative effects on us, especially on children. Tiny amounts of exposure can stimulate cancer cells. They can alter DNA and cause neurological damage, and they can cause diabetes. Furthermore, these exposures not only negatively affect this generation, but the effects are passed on to our children's children, grandchildren, and to their great-great-grandchildren. This is the cover of a study that was done by the EPA and several universities. It is a very long study. I think it's about 36 pages or so, and it contains all kinds of effects on children from endocrine disruption, which comes from very tiny amounts of chemical exposure. One of the biggest revelations along my journey, you may have heard that people say that gargantuan awards given by juries in the lawsuits are a result of emotional decisions. Well, actually, the only emotion that juries are feeling is outrage at Monsanto's corruption and their collusion with scientists and regulators to cover up the dangers of their product. Monsanto manipulated test results to scientists, the press, and government officials in an effort to cover up any evidence of harm. You can Google the Monsanto papers to see what the juries have seen. Anyone would be outraged once they learn the whole story. One of the biggest revelations along my journey has been to come to a correct understanding of what our EPA does in its approval process. I used to think that they were the gatekeepers who decided whether a product was safe or not, and if it was not safe, it could not come onto the market. Well, my EPA scientist friends taught me that that is not the case. What the EPA actually does is to try to determine an acceptable amount of harm a product will cause to our population relative to its benefits to the economy. For example, you may have heard about the EPA's recent affirmation that glyphosate is safe to use, yet the World Health Organization's International Agency for Research on Cancer declared it's a probable carcinogen. How did the two agencies come to different conclusions? This slide shines light on how the EPA works, and it explains why the World Health Organization came to a different conclusion. These graphs are from a recent study done by Charles Benbrook, a retired professor from Washington State University and an expert on glyphosate use worldwide. Here's what the EPA considered: limited science, mostly given to them by Monsanto. IARC looked at the whole world body of published science. The process here is typical of all of these types of agricultural products. Here is one of our school campuses. It happened to be my children's campus, Vista Verde School in Irvine. And it was chosen as one of the initial pilot sites when our district decided to try out organics. And what we're talking about today, and what Irvine has accomplished, is a responsible and beneficial way of stopping the use of synthetic products around our communities. These images were taken on the same site, years apart. They're in the same spot. It's the same corner of the field. And what's funny to me is the picture in the upper left, you can see all the guys standing like this, like the body language. They're just saying, this is never gonna work. And you could see how our field was, right? With brown patches and dirt spots, and the soil was very hard. This is the same field now, Vista Verde. You can go by and check it out. This is what Chip and our city employees did. Organic landscaping has been proven to work, and Irvine is a shining example of what can be done if only we have the will to clean up our process for the well-being of all. I'd like to thank Irvine City Council, Mayor Shea, and our landscaping superintendent, Dennis Quixote, for their willingness to learn new ways in order to protect their employees and our residents' safety. I'd like to thank Chip Osborne for coming across the country to share his expertise to make this possible. I'd like to thank volunteers like Vanessa Handy and Irvine Creation, who are here today, for their tireless work and dedication to this cause. But most of all, I would like to thank all of you for attending to help your communities to employ organic methods. Thank you. The next speaker will be Mayor Christina Shea.
Well, good morning. Let me make sure I get this close. Do you need this? Would you prefer to use it, or you want to use this? No. Well, good morning. It's my pleasure to be here as the mayor of the city of Irvine. I hope you love our new facility. We just opened this about 8 months ago, I believe. We had the dedication. We have so many wonderful community centers, great parks around the city. So I just hope you enjoy and take a little tour around here today. First, I want to thank our community members as well. I want to thank Kathleen Halal, Irvine Creation. I also want to thank Vanessa Armstrong and Chip Osborne. They brought this project to the city 4.5–5 years ago. They've been working so hard to turn Irvine into a non-toxic pesticide community. So actually what happened is in 2016, they came to me and asked me, and actually might have been just prior to that, maybe just at the end of 2015. But they came to me and all the council members, the former mayor, Stephen Choi, and asked that we would think about bringing a non-toxic policy to the city. Well, I'm a cancer survivor. I had thyroid cancer back in my early 20s. And at that point in time, I just started learning everything about cancer, what causes cancer. And of course, that was years and years ago. By looking at me, you would know that, but it was years and years ago. And I studied up on what chemicals and what eating properly and all the things you can do naturally to protect yourself. And of course now today, over the years, I've eaten, just go to a lot of organics. I really try to keep as many chemicals out of my home. And I've been cancer-free for, I don't know, it's been almost 40 years, which is great. And I'm very, you can clap, that's a good thing. So when they brought this proposal to me, I initially said, of course, why wouldn't Irvine, always on the cutting edge, a city of innovation, why wouldn't we go for this program? So I brought it to our council, and believe it or not, I am a Republican, and I'm not embarrassed to say it. I had a full Republican council, and I thought, oh my gosh, they're very conservative, and I didn't think they would go with this approach, because it did increase a very minimally amount over time, our budget, but to me it was a value. I was shocked and surprised that our entire council supported this policy. And from that point on, then of course we turn it over to our city staff, who's done a great job, and you're going to hear from Dennis. I was going to talk more and more about the mechanics of what we've done, but I thought it would be much better to have Dennis come up, who's been working with me for the last 4 years, and some of our volunteers as well, to make sure that we have the best protocol. And it's been a learning experience, but he'll get into that detail with you, but we really are so proud of what we've done. The city uses organic methods, limiting pesticides to 600 acres of our parks, 900 acres of our public right-of-way, and 76,000 trees are being cared for under this organic plan. Also, we have 16,000 acres, including the park system, of open space that has gone organic as well. We're now trying to push for our HOAs and our private developers. The Irvine company are now taking all their avocado orchards, and they're now using non-toxic pesticides in the orchards because they're spraying right next to the schools and wearing masks, and parents get all up in arms, which you can understand why, the optics of it. And so it's been great to see the progression over the years of what has been we've been able to do here in the city. Because we want to protect not only ourselves, but the health of our children, our pets, and our wildlife in our open space. We have been using goats. You probably read a lot about how goats are being used around the state of California, around the country, but we're using goats in our open space for lead abatement, but it's also for fire abatement as well. I'm the chairwoman of the Foothill Eastern Toll Roads here in the city, in the county. And I'm the chair of the environmental committee, and now we've brought this whole concept to the toll roads in our open space, and we're now starting to use goats. We're even using cattle in some of the open space areas to, so we have a natural approach rather than using all the pesticides that we were using for many years. So I'm so proud about what we're doing in Irvine. It's just a normal, natural way to approach protecting our community and making it green. And actually, when you get the ground healthy, it kind of takes care of itself. And also, I think we're using insects, to fight off these pests that we have in our trees and whatnot. And so, of course, this is what Dennis will get into much more detail about that. So I just want to, again, thank all of you for coming. It's my pleasure to be here. I know it's difficult. Some councils look at the financials and they get very worried, but once they're educated, I'll tell you then it moves in a pretty progressive way, and I know it's important to have all the staff members from the communities to be updated, to be educated to what we can do and how successful it's been here in our city. And 160 cities across America are now using similar organic policies that we have implemented here in Irvine, which is another great accolade. And I can't tell you exactly as I go to sit down and call Dennis up, because I do want you to hear from him. The state of California is honoring me and our volunteers in our community this February by the EPA. I can't tell you exactly what it is, but it'll all come out in an announcement in my State of the City, February 25th, and you're all invited to attend. Thank you very much. So nice to be here today.
Figure this one out. Is it okay? Can anyone hear me if I don't use the microphone? So I can just kind of walk around? Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Shea. Thank you, everyone, for attending. We're starting on year 5. So, December 2015, a group of residents approached me about not using Roundup and 2,4-D. Very simple request, but for us in the landscape world, those are our 2 products we use constantly, every day. So for us to change our practice and our protocol is not something that you just do lightly and not something you do overnight, because we still want to provide outstanding parks for all of our residents. But now we're changing the method. So no glyphosate, no 2,4-D. We're going on year 5. All of our parks in the city have not been applied with any herbicide in 4 years. So we've done it all through manual labor, mechanical methods, and non-chemical methods. So mowing, string trimmers, hand pulling. But we've also focused on the cultural practices. And this is where it's very important not to, not assign enough budget for these very important tasks. Aerification on athletic fields and parks is first thing that needs to occur. We aerify our parks, passive areas 4 times a year. Our athletic fields, we're up to 6 to 8 times a year. And part of that aerification is deep tine, shatter tine. We want to get that gas exchange. We want to get the drainage going so that we have that perfect combination of soil, air, and water to our roots. So we're getting proper root growth. I've worked with my contractors and I've told them you need to buy the right equipment. And that's the key here, is making sure you have right equipment that's capable of performing the work and getting around. We have 62 parks in this city. I have 200 acres of athletic fields. We need the big machines, we need the tractors, we need the manpower to get it done. And thanks to the city council and our budget, we get it done. And one of the big changes I made about 10 years ago was utilizing the humic-based fertilizers. And it's not the standard 1668, 2100 that we all grew up with. These are humic shale that comes from a quarry in Utah. I use live earth products and JTM. There is a little bit of nitrogen that we add throughout the year on specific fields because not every park has the same clay, not every park has the same soil, not every park has the same requirements. Soil testing is the key, and I know when Chip gets up there and starts talking, he'll hammer in that point of soil testing. But these humic-based fertilizers we put down 4 times a year, quarterly. So we'll be starting up in March. When I first started, I was using about 9 bags per acre. That was the recommended rate. I'm getting the same results with 5 bags per acre now. So over the years, we've improved the soil, we've improved the ability of the soil to hold on to nutrients, and we've grown turf that now utilizes those nutrients. And then the last 2, organic compost. We have an annual renovation at our parks each year. We use that time to bring in organic compost to address really problem-worn areas, localized dry spot areas, and bring up our organic content where we need it. And then lastly, overseeding. We have primarily Bermuda fields on our athletic kikuyu grass for our passive areas. Warm season grasses, they go dormant in the wintertime. We need to sit there and overseed the athletic fields for conditions, for the safety, but also some of the shady spots in the passive areas. So focusing on good cultural practices. Lately, I've been using the easy flow injectors. I don't know if you're aware of these, but they just go straight in line on the main line. There's no power, there's no pump. It's just drawn in every time you water, a little bit of fertilizer goes out. This has been very successful in getting liquid humic out to our parks and actually utilizing a product they have called Critter Max. It's an organic product to discourage pests, gophers, insects in your park. We've used this for the last year at Quail Hill Community Park. So if you want, you could go to Quail Hill Community Park. We ran a 100% organic trial utilizing nothing but liquid products through the Easy Flow injector, and we have tremendous results. I'll actually show you a slide here in a second. And
What was the product called? Critter what?
Critter Max. It's garlic, cinnamon, a couple other bitter tasting elements, and it runs every time you irrigate. You're putting a little bit out there, and it's discouraging the pests.
Have our gophers written to the city?
They like the organic balance. And then for the parts that we don't have injectors, or we're really trying to target a certain area, we use boom spray applications. So I get people, calling in, hey, there's a spray tank out on the fields, they're spraying pesticides. So a lot of it comes back to educating people, putting out the signage and posting of what we are doing. But we use a product called Sumagrow, which incorporates a lot of microbial activity. The one thing with biostimulants is you can't run them through the Easy Flow because they need to be put out quickly and with a lot of water. So that's one thing we learned. We did try utilizing the Easy Flow, but we weren't getting the product out fast enough. So these units, for Quail Hill Park, as an example, it's about 8 $8,000 installed, and to run the whole program on a 16-acre facility was only costing us $5,000. So it's a very inexpensive way to get a product out that's going to benefit the park. We've had tremendous success with it, and now we're slowly going through all the old parks. Our new parks, like this one, we spec'd it into the design, so this park has it as well.
Is that just for gophers and rodents, or is that to fertilize the grass also, like
So the
fertigation?
Critter Max is for the pests. That's for
Okay.
the gophers and some ant activity. The liquid humic is for the turf grass. So you could run a combination. The other nice thing about this tank is because our recycled water is very high in salts, we could run an acid flush through the tank, which then helps eliminate some of the sodium in our soils. So it's a very simple, and instead of having a truck full of fertilizer pull up and having to spread it and blow off the sidewalk and water it in, a guy can show up with 10 gallons of liquid, dump it in the tank, in a matter of 20 minutes he's done, and there's no impact to the park users because it all comes out at night when no one's at the park. So it's a very safe way of applying what's necessary. And through your soil testing, you could then change your mix for each park, depending on what you need to accomplish. So it's a very useful tool. I highly recommend it for everyone to at least experiment with. So then, this is a picture of Quail Hill Park. So that is 100% organically treated for a year. So it's not to say that there are not pests, okay? Pests do occur. This field did have some goosegrass in it, but we hand-picked it out. I have a crew of 6 laborers who go through our 62 parks, and that's their job, is to work on some of these areas that have a little bit of goosegrass, a little bit of crabgrass. But our policy is an organic first approach. Our policy is not ban all pesticides. Our policy is if we have a pest, we can't control it non-chemically, our first mode of action is an organic pesticide.
My question was, how do you handle the kikuyu in your hybrid Bermuda?
We sought it out. So during our renovations, if we have a patch of kikuyu grass, we just cut it out and put the Bermuda down, and that solves it. And it's actually a very, $1 a square foot, just a couple patches, it's an inexpensive way of doing it. So prior to 2016, back in the day, the typical program in the parks was all these different chemicals, from fungicides to herbicides, pre-emergents. As you can see, starting in 2016, all of those were eliminated. So we've been able to eliminate, hundreds of gallons of actual product over the city and the parks, going to this organic method. And what I get asked most about is, okay, so now we can't spray glyphosate, what do I spray? And in 2016, there was really nothing on the market. There was Avenger, which we tried, and it didn't give us the results we needed. Everyone knew about vinegar, but it wasn't even labeled for use for municipalities. So we've been able to go from Scythe was the old burned down product. It is organic. It's a pelargonic acid. We went from Scythe and Avenger to now we have Suppress. Now there's a new product out called Wow, Whack Out Weeds. It's very effective. It actually has shown that it can control some of our Bermuda and nutsedge and some of the open areas in our planters. It takes 2 applications, but it is showing very good results. And the final sand, we've been using that during the dormant period right now in Bermuda grass as a way of treating some of the broadleaves in the turf. So we're trialing using final sand as a way to control broadleaves in our turf without impacting Bermuda because it's dormant right now. So what started out with really not a lot of options, a very expensive option in Avenger, has now, these products have come on the market, and the price is now starting to become more manageable in your budget. The WOW is about $60 a gallon, and you're running a 6% solution. So that's a big difference from weed farms, which are running basically the 20%, or you're taking it right out of the jug and spraying it straight. Final sand, 16%. Suppress, we run anywhere from a 6 to 9%. With suppress, we get good success in our right-of-ways with it, but it took us trialing different methods. And one thing we found with these acid-based products is the water in your spray tank has to be neutral or slightly acidic. So before you add the product, make sure that you are acidifying your tank, and then you will not neutralize the concentration. And the other important thing is anytime you spray, run a sticker product, making sure that it is actually sticking and you're wetting the entire leaf surface of the plant in order to get the most effective kill. And through that, through training our contractors, through working with experts and pest control advisors, we fine-tuned it. So now we're spraying our right-of-way not at 9%. Now we're getting the same control at 7%. So over the 4 years, we've brought down our costs. And I expect it to continue as these new products come out, which are fantastic. So for rodents, for gophers, started out with gopher strand and Uncle Ian's repellent, which are great, but once you irrigate, you kind of lose its effectiveness. So that's where the Easy Flow running the Critter Max, we get a constant feed. And then recently, there's Gopher X and the IGI carbon dioxide. Gases injected into the gopher run, it has worked really well. So we've been able to eliminate the use of any sort of rodenticide for gophers in our parks. And then rats and mice, again, the Radex, we used a lot of Radex at first, but we weren't really getting the control. And recently we've had new products come on the market. So the Pterid block works really well in conjunction with the contrapest. So that's kind of like in bait boxes. We use them around facilities, like our train station, around community centers. The rats will eat the pterid and they'll also drink the contrapest, and the contrapest is the contraceptive. So you're basically eliminating their ability to reproduce. So you're lowering the population that way, and then the pterid helps get rid of them the rest of them. And again, in a secure bait box, you don't have to change your practice. It's just a different product, works very effective for us. And then insects, the Ecovia, we've used that since day one. It continues to be our go-to for ants, bees, and wasps. And then Entrust, which is a spinosad, we've been using that for red important fire ants. And I don't know if everyone here experienced it, but we had a really bad October, November with fire ants. I think of 62 parks, I had fire ants in like 30 of them. Bad infestations. And the Entrust, it was 3 applications in a row. So we found that the most effective control was when we got the mound, we drenched it 3 consecutive days, and that was the most effective way to control fire ants. That way we didn't have the big outbreaks, and we didn't need to apply baits. Even diseases. So what started out as us spraying all the last bunch of fungicides, I grew up working in the golf course industry, and we had our spray shed full of pesticides that would go out every 2 weeks, regardless of what was going on in the greens, because it was just a way of us allowing us to sleep at night. Now we have products out there that we apply preventively, knowing we have high-profile fields. And I take the example of the Great Park, where our soccer stadium is a high-profile field. We proactively spray Actinovate and Companion, alternating them every other month. And we have not had take-all patch, which wiped out the field 2 years ago. So we've been able to prevent being proactive using the organic controls, and it's been highly effective for us. So that's just a rundown of what I do in my program. And I know Chip will add on to it, but if there's any questions, if you ever just want to, there's my contact information, feel free to call me, email me. All this information of what the products we use is on the city's website. Under Irvine News, we have our annual report. I'm working on 2019 right now, so that'll be posted shortly. This information's there, but please feel free to call me. I'm happy to talk to you about what issues you're dealing with and how I deal with probably the same issue. So, any questions? Rob?
Dennis, in the past, you've kind of said what's an acceptable level of control. And we've seen your acceptable level of control going up by more and more products that are being on the market and being utilized. What's your level of control now that you've been doing it a few years? When I talk to my clients, we say we're going to have not 100% weed control, but what's acceptable for the population.
With the organic products, I'm probably getting 95% control in my streetscapes, just utilizing the organic herbicides. There are still a couple areas where Bermuda kind of gets into some of the ground cover where you have to use the synthetic. But 95% effective control.
95%. All right. Thank you, Dennis.
No problem.
In a percentage, how expensive, this is a little higher or a little lower? I don't need to know the number, just the percentage. How much I'm expecting to expend more or less?
I think every entity is going to have their different scenarios, but I always say focus on a park and work your own program as your budget allows. But for
Okay,
me,
let's say one part, just to get an idea.
for me, it went up 5%.
5% higher.
Higher.
Okay. One of my vendors that tried to still selling some of their stuff was telling me, oh no, that product is like 5 times more than brand. I'm like,
Yeah.
doesn't make sense, but I like what you say.
But also
we can
realize,
improve that. We
you
can.
know, the state of California, you may not be able to buy Roundup
Yeah.
going forward. The distributors may not want to take on that insurance liability.
Remember, he was a vendor.
Right.
Like, how I'm gonna sell that?
Right.
My client's gonna go crazy
Right.
about the organic stuff, like it. 5%, 10%. I believe it's
And the
something that is manageable.
And the easy flow, the liquid humic with the different products is a great way of keeping your budget down and getting the results you're
That's the
looking
key.
for.
Okay, easy flow. Thank you.
Are you able to work with the county, like you mentioned, fire ants, like the county comes through our city and things like that? Like, how are you able to work with them with?
So we have an unwritten agreement that I let them know where I have fire ants that I've treated with Entrust, and I have them come out and inspect. We talk, and if there is an issue that's building up, we'll work with them. But for the most part, we just communicate to them. We want the first option to treat. And it took us a while to kind of figure out the method, but using the Entrust 3 days in a row has been able to really stop it.
You mentioned you alternate toward disease control every 2 months. Activate, and there was another.
Companion.
Companion?
Companion and Actinovate are the two we rotate through the parks. And those are just our high profile fields that we want to maintain that high quality curve. Any other questions?
Within your program-based approach to how you manage the site specific to the soil types and the plant types that are on that site, being a big city, of course, are you able to manage your program based upon your inputs with an expectation of your outputs being different? Like controlling costs and controlling manpower and working with outside contractors, understanding those cost points and how you manage your programs. Are you able to be very specific with that?
Because here in the city, we do everything through contract services. So I'm able to dial in each site exactly the way I want it, and I can change with the weather. So something that we can't predict is what the weather's gonna bring us. So last year, it rained so much, it put us so far behind in our program, we couldn't aerify as much. It was just raining all the time. So we didn't get as many aerifications in last year. But what did I use my budget for? I put in more easy flows. So I'm not losing my budget because of weather. I'm trying to keep moving forward with the program. Now this year, I expect to get in 8 aerifications because we're already dry. I'm already able to start aerifying this week. So that's how you have to adjust your program, is based upon the weather.
Thank you.
So I'm from Simi Valley, where we have lots of gophers, lots and lots and lots and lots of gophers. And so I was doing some research online about how farmers are taking care of this, and some of them are doing big pop holes. And in Simi, we have like literally a place called Eagle's Nest where we have. So is this something that you guys implement down here with also using the wildlife to kill the wildlife, or is that, are you just using this injector thing?
We haven't started using owl boxes yet, but we're getting close to implementing them at the Great Park, where the owls actually have an opportunity to fly. In our parks with the lights and all the noise, it's not an environment for them. But at the Great Park, we have a couple areas that, the Upper B and some of the pond area that we're going to try them.
So this is future plans for you?
Correct. Okay, I'm getting told that's my time. But one last question.
What are you using as a pre-emergent?
We don't use pre-emergence.
Just living.
Driveway areas?
No pre-emergence at all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Now we're going to share a video from Beyond Pesticides, a nonprofit that shares information about the health impacts of pesticide use.
Great to be with you all. I'm really excited about
Is this on your website
the
also?
opportunity to talk about and train on transitioning from current practices and chemical use to organic land management practices. I'm going to run through a quick presentation as sort of an introduction, but the real bulk of the program today is focused on actual practical information that will give you an overview and some really specific information on natural organic land management. I wanted to start with a discussion of some very influential person, and there have been many over the years, but Rachel Carson, who wrote the book Silent Spring, really gives us an orientation to why we're really here today. We are here because we've really adopted practices that are harmful in some ways to both people, workers handling chemicals, children playing on turf, playgrounds, landscapes, and the environment. We're seeing a decline in bee populations and so forth. So Rachel Carson brought out this concept that we need to understand the science around the chemicals that we're using and what they're doing to the environment. But we also need to understand biological systems. And this is her quote. She basically provided us with guiding principles, an affirmation of core values. This is a value-based discussion on some level, but it's rooted in scientific understanding, which is critical to this. This is a cover of the book, the original book, printed back in the 1960s, 1962. And this is her quote: by their very nature, chemical controls are self-defeating, for they have been devised and applied without taking into effect the complex biological systems against which they have been blindly hurled. The chemicals have been pre-tested against only a few individual species, but not against whole living communities. And then, interestingly enough, think about this, this is what, 58 years ago, She said at that time, we must make wider use of alternative methods that are now known, and we must devote our ingenuity and resources to developing them. Interestingly, we have a lot of new methods since she wrote about this in '62. So today, the conversation is going to move from this general presentation, which I'm going to give you, to very specific issues around why we do soil testing, how we condition soil, cultural practices like aeration, and the benefits of these practices in terms of water retention, i.e. less water use. But let me just run down quickly what the sort of the reasons for. So when we look at a pesticide, you've seen a pesticide product label. When you look at that label, you see on that label the name of the active ingredient. Like for instance, Roundup. You pick up a bottle of Roundup, it says on the label the active ingredient, which is glyphosate, and that is the material that attacks the target pest. That's the chemical material. But then it's in a formulation. It can be in a liquid, it can be in a granule, it can be in a dust formulation, and all those ingredients and mixture of ingredients form the solution in which the chemical is dispersed into the environment. So in that mixture, we have something called inert ingredients, and often they're described as other ingredients on the product label. The point of this is they end up being the majority of the product formulation. So the glyphosate may be 2%, it could be 40%. The other ingredients make up the rest of that formulation. And so why are we concerned about that? Well, first of all, they're not disclosed on the product label. So you as a user and the community, the park folks, the people using the community, really don't know what all those ingredients are, and some of them are toxic. I mean, they're toxic ingredients. Not all the time, but virtually most of the time, these other ingredients are toxic ingredients. And sometimes they contain contaminants and impurities, and this can be a function of not necessarily what's in the product, but what happens to that product when it's exposed to air and water and it breaks down. And so we see sometimes dioxin forming and other hazardous pesticides or chemicals. And metabolites. Metabolites are a breakdown product, meaning once you oxidize something, expose it to oxygen, it actually transforms into another chemical, which can be as or more dangerous than what we call the parent compound. And then when we look at, well, what are the direct impacts on health associated with these chemical exposures, we've looked at the 30 most commonly monitored chemicals. And these are chemicals that are cancer-causing. They're known endocrine disruptors. The endocrine system is like the message system that controls our organs, all of our organ systems. They're linked to birth defects, reproductive effects, kidney and liver damage, and they can also cause rashes and sensitize your skin. In addition to that, I mentioned earlier, there are environmental concerns, and these chemicals are associated with groundwater contamination, toxic to birds, toxic to fish, and toxic to bees. And that is the challenge. How do you disperse in the environment a known toxic chemical and then not cause indiscriminate poisoning to wildlife and bees? And we saw that problem with these chemicals called neonicotinoids. You may have used imidacloprid for insects in the turf system or landscape. And these chemicals are what are known as systemic poisons. So they move through the vascular system of the plant and they end up in nectar and pollen and the glutation droplets. And so there's any insect that's coming along to feed on that plant, a flower in particular, or flowering grass, that insect is going to be poisoned by that chemical exposure. And so this is what we're seeing in the environment when we study adverse effects. You're seeing these birth defects from a chemical, this was related to atrazine. And so, when we see this in the environment at levels that are considered safe or are in compliance. This wasn't the fault of the applicator per se. This is a chemical that was used in accordance with label directions. We're seeing these effects over time. The indirect effects I mentioned related to bees affects butterflies as well. And you know, if we're spraying a landscaped area, for instance, those chemicals move on the target site. They move through drift, air currents, they volatilize, you know, they're applied, they heat up in the sun, they off gas, and that moves, that volatility associated with the chemical moves through the landscape and lands on other plants like milkweed. It could land on a habitat that we have for these insects. So we're looking at sort of a range of potential and known adverse effects. And then children, of course, you know, we're working in an environment in which children are using these sites. These are ball fields, these are playing fields, these are parks. And so, you know, it's important to understand that children are at elevated risk, right? So children, because of their size, but also because they don't have developed organ systems, really are more vulnerable to pesticide exposure and the adverse effects. And you know, studies that are done, epidemiologic studies where the scientists will go out and ask about use patterns, ask about exposure patterns. The evidence there demonstrates an association between early life exposure to pesticides and pediatric cancers, cognitive function, and behavioral problems. And this is really a concern because, you know, in many ways these can be subtle effects. If we're talking about behavior or we're talking about autism, we're talking about ability to concentrate among children, you know, the studies are very concerning in terms of the link between exposure overall. So we, years ago, I mean, our organization was founded in 1981, and very soon after that, and during its development, we have worked very closely with those who have been trying to reduce and then eliminate toxic chemical inputs. So we got very involved with organic practices. I served on the National Organic Standards Board from 2010 to 2015 and reviewed the materials, some of which you'll be talking about today, that are used in organic systems. But the important thing about organic, and you'll be getting much more information on this, is that in organic we're talking about whole systems. We're talking about a systems approach. We're not talking about product substitution. Although, of course, we do use products, and we use products that are compatible with organic systems. What does that mean? That means that we don't want to use a product that can hurt a bee, or a butterfly, or a bird. We certainly don't want to use products that are harmful to children. So when you're looking at overall the sort of range of issues that we're concerned about looking at a whole system. How do you manage that ecological system that is a lawn, that is the soil in which the lawn grows, and how do you incorporate materials, products into that so that you don't work at cross purposes. You don't build up soil to protect bees and then come along and use something that reverses that process and is harmful. And we worked up a list of compatible materials based on some of the work I do with the National Organic Standards Board, but also the work of the Organic Materials Review Institute, in which they evaluate those materials for compatibility with organic systems. The other thing that was really important to me, which we really don't have at this stage in lawn care, is that if you go to the store, you've seen that organic label on food, that USDA organic. There's a rigorous process of record keeping and inspection and certification associated with that label. We don't have that in lawn care per se, but Chip Osborne, who we've met and we're working with, and Osborne Organics has been very involved with accreditation, that is teaching processes that ensure that the user of materials and the land manager has been trained in organic systems and understands what that's about. So we're learning a lot from agriculture, actually, when we apply the principles to landscaping. Organic agriculture is a $50 billion industry. It's growing. It's the largest profit center in agriculture today. So we want to take those principles. They are cost-effective principles, and we'll be talking a little bit about that as we work through the plan for the properties that eventually you'll be working on. This is Chip Osborne's hockey field, and I think it may be softball as well. He'll correct me if I'm wrong. But I showed up on one summer day in Marblehead, Massachusetts, unannounced. Chip, I want to see the field. We're going to the fields. And this beautiful field is what he showed me. It's just something to behold. The beauty of this is not just in the aesthetic of it, but it is a system that results in more resiliency. So it's a healthier system. It requires less input because you're cycling nutrients naturally, less disease and infestation, and greater water retention. So what more could you ask for? And there it is in Marblehead. So when we talk about organic, and this relates to organic agriculture, but I wanted you to sort of put this in perspective when we talk about, especially with those who handle pesticides or make decisions around pesticide use. You compare conventional, meaning chemical-intensive practices, with the organic, and it's incredible. The longer these leaves on this figure here, the better the system is. So the soil quality is incredibly better. Okay, what does that mean? That means we've got life in the soil biology, soil biomass, and we're building that up, and it's working for us. In agriculture, they call that ecosystem services. They're providing services to both the ecosystem, but to also the system, the management system. Minimize energy use. We minimize energy use. There's more energy use over here. Biodiversity, look at the difference here in biodiversity. And you can go all the way around here. Employment of workers, better, reduced worker exposure. Look at the difference here. Look at that compared to this. So overall, we're seeing, and same thing, of course, with minimizing pesticide use. Overall, the benefits are just astounding and very exciting because, we're not just talking about a problem. We're not just talking about a problem. We're really now focused on solutions that work. And that's what we're talking about today. We're going to run through what the basics of soil chemistry are, pH, nutrient management, organic matter, cation exchange. These are terms you'll become familiar with. And then we're going to talk a lot about the biomass, because the biomass really feeds the microbial activity in the soil. We don't think about the environment as the land under where we walk, that is under us where we walk. We don't think about that as much as we think about wildlife, mammals, birds. We see these creatures in our day-to-day life. We don't see the organisms, obviously, in the soil, but that's what we need to begin talking about, and we will today. This concept of feeding the soil, an approach to ensuring that the soil microbes are nurtured, are doing their job. And how do you do that? We'll talk about natural fertilizers and bringing those nutrients. Organic systems do not use synthetic fertilizers. And just one word about that. As a community, whether it's Irvine or any other community in Southern California or throughout the country, we care about issues around climate change, we care about issues around biodiversity, and when you embrace an organic system, yeah, you get all these things we've been talking about, right? You get all the benefits from the health to the ecological, environmental benefits, but you also feed into solving these larger, very critical problems. Because with organic practices, we're eliminating fossil fuel-based materials. That's what we're doing. We're taking synthetics out, and we're eliminating those. We're using less water, so we're using less resources. So overall, we're having an effect, not only in our community, right here, but we're having an effect in terms of these global problems, in terms of correcting these global problems for our children and for the next generation. And then there are materials, which are really exciting. These are becoming popular and available that go to compost teas, and you've all heard of compost. Well, you can extract the microbial life from those teas and apply that. Humates to build the fungal life in the soil, and compost to increase organic matter. Now, all of this, determining what's necessary, comes from that soil test that we mentioned earlier. You know, what do we know about what's going on in the soil? And that's critical to making these determinations as to what to use. Sometimes there's a transition period. Sometimes we don't move from, you know, A to Z overnight. We go through transition because depending on what the soil looks like and the conditions, we have to begin to build soil life, activate microbial activity if it's dormant, build the biomass, and build the soil. So we're constantly going through that process and moving to the organic system. Chip will talk about this, but we do not see collapse in any of these transitions. You know, that's a myth from years ago when people said, I'm going to try organic, didn't have a system really in place for the materials to support that, and programs often weren't successful. But so, you know, keep in mind that we are not only going to ensure that we're not creating a problem for anybody, we're going to improve the aesthetic and improve the quality of the turf system that exists. So you can't talk about, you know, an organic system without talking about cultural practices. So what do I mean by that? Irrigation, deep watering, cultivation, overseeding, mowing, already mentioned aeration. These are things that will be talked about as part of the organic system. So here we are. You know, you're faced with these, for some, new ideas. For others, you know, you may be using a lot of these practices already. Might not quite be part of that system that we're talking about, but many of those practices that we mentioned may be in use already, and that's a great thing. I think overall, though, we are saying, you know, there's a discrete list of inputs that are compatible, there are discrete practices that are compatible, and that many of the things we're asking you not to use in an organic system are perfectly legal to use. I mean, they're registered by EPA, they're registered by the state, and so some will say, well, since they're registered, they must be safe to use. Well, there's where, you know, there's sort of a disconnect, because the governmental agencies that regulate these chemicals are always playing catch up with the science. So DDT is okay, 1 minute, a year later, two years later, whatever, the science emerges and we find out it's causing eggshell thinning and causing a collapse of migratory bird populations and eagles, etc. So we learn about these chemicals and then we decide after the fact that we want to replace them. We are trying to get ahead of the curve with what we call a cautionary approach. You know, we're taking out chemicals that have controversy around them. There's data in scientific literature that's problematic, and we're taking precaution. We are saying, look, we don't need these chemicals. Why would we use them if they're not necessary to achieving our community goal, which is a good-looking aesthetic park system, fields that are playable, have good playability, and then, you know, the ability to manage these things in a way that doesn't, you know, harm anybody or the environment. So I leave you with this. Again, just to reiterate, organic landscaping is an ecological management system that promotes and enhances biodiversity, biological cycles and soil biology we talked about. It is based on minimal use of synthetic inputs, and synthetic is an interesting word when it comes to the materials that are organic compatible, because they're usually they're extracts from minerals or plant material. So the extraction process is considered a synthetic chemical change process, and management systems that clearly restore, maintain, and enhance the local ecology. So with that, I thank you for being a part of this effort. This is an incredible opportunity to learn about organic systems. When we work with communities, we view this day, this training, as the beginning. In other words, the information's there, a plan is created in every community that begins an organic systems approach. That plan is put together, and then the plan gets tweaked over time in response to weather conditions, in response to infestations that may occur, or in response to problems that crop up. So there's a curve here of learning, of interaction and consultation, and again, thank you so much for being a part of this really important effort. Go get it.
You can go.
I'll go without it. About now. Good? Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Good morning.
Turn the volume down on your board up there.
I don't have to use it. No problem. We'll go without it. No problem at all. Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Sorry about that. Good morning. My name is Tom Carrasco, principal owner at MTC Horticulture Company, Nature Thrive, and Leaf Landscaping. I was asked to come here today to talk a little bit about some of my background. We are all organic landscapers. We have all organic products, and we do all organic consulting. Oh, okay. Do this. So I was asked here today to talk a little bit about our background, but also how we do it. We're going to give a little bit of insight today on how we do our organic landscaping and our organic consulting. A little bit of background on me. Thank you very much, by the way, for Mayor Shea having us here today, as well as Organic Land Care Project and everybody here that put so much time and effort into it. We appreciate the opportunity to be here. So a little bit of background. I grew up in Salinas, California, big ag community. Obviously lots of pesticide sprays there, probably more pesticides sprayed there than most of the country, most likely combined. My father and as well as my grandparents and all my uncles actually grew up in the fields. They were out picking the fruit, picking the vegetables. And I grew up around that. I've been in the field since I was a kid with my dad. Love my Mexican heritage. Every single one of my father's family has gone through cancer. My father actually has had cancer. All of his brothers have had cancer. My two aunts have had breast cancer, as well as my grandmother. And my grandfather, unfortunately, didn't make it. He had cancer in his leg. So super personal to us. And my dad has always talked about sustainability. It's been huge in our family. He actually talked about it from day one since I was a kid. In 1968, his senior thesis at Cal Poly, probably one of the only Mexican Americans there at that time, was actually the biological control of the cobbler moth. And that was 1968, way before his time. So, pretty cool stuff. So going back to some of the things that my dad talked about, he always talked about integrated pest management, the use of scouting early for pests,
focusing on the health of the plant to reduce pests. This is everything that we're talking about today. And obviously this is 46 years later, which is pretty awesome. He's still out actually working in the fields. We have a family certified sustainable vineyard up north, so he's very, very big in our family. You know, it even gets more personal than that. In 2017, I had a tumor taken out of the back of my head right here. Thank God it was benign, but I grew up in that whole pesticide area, and who knows what my future holds, but super healthy as Knox today. One of the funniest jokes I like to actually do is after I get a haircut like I did yesterday, I try and go get $5 off for this little nick in the back of my head. It doesn't work very often, but my wife hates when I do that. Our team and our staff, some of the same basic elements that we use today, actually, some of the same basic principles my dad talked about for so many years, we actually use today in the field. And that's some of the things I want to talk about today with some of the landscape contractors, board members, and property managers, is how we do it. So in 1995, I graduated from Virginia Tech in horticulture. You know, I did not want to be a clod kicker. I actually went in as a business management. I wanted to get out of the ag, but I fell back into it. All my buddies that were on my floor said, hey, you know way more than we do about this soil stuff just from growing up around it. You know, come do some horticulture with us. So I did, actually, and transferred at my second semester of freshman year, and a lot of my business classes transferred, thank God, because at that time, back in the early 90s, they figured if you're going to have a degree in horticulture, you're probably going to be running something. Not too many people were getting degrees in horticulture back in the early 90s. So after interning with a large chemical company, actually, I was, believe it or not, they had me doing applications back then with neonicotinoids. That was something that they had me doing for my summer internship, doing testing with that. Little did I know back then. After interning with a large chemical distribution company for 3 summers and getting my pest control advisor's license after I graduated, I was originally hired by that company. But then I had an awesome opportunity. I had a company approach me. They were very, very focused on organic fertilizers and organic pesticides. They were starting to develop that. I worked for them for about 9.5 years. During that time, we got bought out. That was 1997. In 2002, we got bought by a large conglomerate. They're still around today, actually. That distribution company is still around today. But our parent company, who was focused on the organic fertilizers and organic chemicals, actually folded shortly thereafter. I don't think that the community was ready for it yet, you know, and it's so awesome to see all of you here today because I think that we're getting there. I know that we're getting there. So that distribution company was sold again. I worked for them for about 3 years. We grew. We had some great success, but I was traveling a lot. I wanted to be home. And so I decided to partner up with a landscape company in the Inland Empire. And this landscape company, pretty cool landscape company, they didn't know what they didn't know yet, but they wanted to be sustainable. And this is in 2005, 2006, so even still ahead of our time. We're actually starting to remove turf in 2007 to do water conservation, so a little bit ahead of our time, you know. It was a great time in my career. I spent the next 9.5 years with that landscape company. I was an owner-operator, had a great time. By the end of those 10 years, we grew from 40 employees to almost 350 employees. We were feeding a lot of families. It was so much fun. My partners want to focus on sustainable landscaping. I had the drive to do it, so I definitely fit right in. We used operational tactics and worked hard at becoming the best and most knowledgeable of water conservation back then. Back then, even in 2005, 2006, 2007, there wasn't a whole lot of products, as Dennis talked about, to try and go sustainable. So we had to learn to use operational tactics, cultural practices. So we got really, really good at that. We'll talk a little bit about that in a bit. So we opened up a water conservation division. again, did our first turf removal project in 2007. It worked, we made it. In fact, we grew through the Great Recession, and all of you in here, I'm sure, no matter what age you are, remember the Great Recession. It was tough. It was 15-hour days, wearing 3 different hats or more, but we did it. We fed 350 families through that Great Recession, and we really pushed the sustainability. So we had a great time doing it. In 2015, after getting that company through the Great Recession, I was ready for a change. I knew that there was more. I knew that I wanted to do more advocacy. I knew that I wanted to get more educated on going organic. I knew that I wanted to influence real change, and I wanted to give back. And so I began a consulting firm in 2015 that was going to focus on helping landscape companies go organic. That was my plan. I began to go to seminars, do a ton of research, contact advocates to try and get more information. But after working both directly and indirectly for a few years with many of the largest landscape companies out there, I realized 3 things. And by the way, all these folks at these large landscape companies are my dear friends. Some of them are in the room today. There's 3 things that were evident at the time. Number 1, products on the market either did not work well enough for large projects like HOAs, were too expensive, or were misunderstood. And again, this is in 2015. The clients weren't ready or didn't care yet. This was way before there was any of these lawsuits with Roundup, or it was mainstream. A lot of us were into it, but it wasn't mainstream yet. No distributors or manufacturers are focused on helping landscape companies, HOAs, or boards work the budget. It's about working the budget, as Dennis talked about. You have to work the budget, you have to work the operations side of it. It's not just a product swap. See it as possible to go natural and organic, and it is. So, these 3 facts pushed us to create a distribution company, MTC Horticulture, that were focused on organic and organic products for the landscape industry. We then began to develop our own product lines, and finally our organic landscaping company to help show that it can be done. It takes planning, it takes education, it takes field knowledge, and the drive to do it. Change is very hard, especially when it involves money. And again, it does involve money. It might not be as much as you think, but to change to organic absolutely takes more money. Landscape maintenance is a very, very competitive market. There are some amazing companies out there, but in a 10 to 12% net profit world, they really can't afford just to eat that. So they need to educate their clients. It's not as much as they think, however, as Dennis pointed out. I agree. It's somewhere in that 5% range. But of course, as landscape contractors, we have to increase that to our clients. But this is an awesome opportunity for us landscape contractors to actually make more net profit in a 10 to 12% net profit world. So cultural practices like raising mowing height, using mulching mowers, and aerification are already in many, many contracts, but need to be timed properly. We're going to talk about that today. The contractor must educate their clients and help them manage their expectations. You have to help your clients manage your expectations, and especially when it comes to money. By being here today, my team and I want to be a part of this education process. Much of the return on investment will be in irrigation down the road. Chip's going to talk about this a little bit later. So irrigation upgrades can be done out of reserve funds, not out of operational funds. These irrigation infrastructures have a lifespan that they are planned for. This is an opportunity for all of us contractors to make more money doing that. Things like added monies for going organic and natural inputs are actually taken out of operational funds. So it's not going to actually impact the operational funds as much, and you're going to offset with the water savings. Reserve funds create a more efficient irrigation system, less water costs. Also taken out of operational funds means a faster ROI on going organic. By the way, more profit for a landscaper. We all love that. There are many great newer technologies on the market that offer good alternatives to synthetic products, but organic land management is not just about product swapping. So before we go on, there's a few things on the cultural side that I want to discuss to go organic. We're all here today to talk about and really influence organic land management. So my partners, Mark Adams, Steve Toller, and of course my wife, who's CEO and runs my world, basically, are here today, and we've all agreed that we're going to kind of share some of our proprietary information for all of you. So, let's do that. The organic and natural herbicides are improving each day. Many claim the ability to kill the roots, but they will never be the leading synthetic herbicide. To me, that's actually a good thing. You know, the leading synthetic herbicides gotten really good at being really good. Back in the day, it took 2 weeks, or it didn't work in the cold, or whatever other issue that there was. Today, it works pretty much in any weather, anytime. You just barely have to look at the weed for it to work. But I do think it's a good thing that we don't have products that are organic and natural that actually work that well, because it forces us to look at cultural things. So, aeration. Aeration, we talked a little bit about this, and I think most people know that it is very, very important to aerate. It's important for opening up the soils. It's important for gas exchange. But I'm going to talk a little bit more about this. Aeration, if you don't do it at the right time, can actually open up your turf for more weed seeds. Why is that? So, that's okay. So why is that an issue? So there's something called degree days, and when you look at the degree days, actually you can track when most insects, most diseases, and actually most weeds are going to germinate. So when you track that, you actually look at the soil temperatures. Oh, back up. So when you look at the soil temperatures, you know when specific weeds are going to germinate. That's how we patrol. We actually go out, we take soil temperatures, we look at the degree days, and we know when our tough weeds are going to germinate. So what do? We actually go out and we lay down mulch at those times. And if all of you get a little bit of insight, a lot of times those degree days happen when most of us aerate. So between September and October, if you're aerating your turf, you're most likely opening it up for more broadleaf weeds. Oh, thank you. Just go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So, on the IPM, this allows and focuses the landscape industry to focus on systematic approach. Organic land management, which our expert Chip Osborne is going to talk about a little bit more, is not just about the product swap. So if you're looking to do that, most likely it's not going, oh, there we go. So one of the things that my dad used to talk about all the time is this. My dad used to talk about all the time is IPM. One of the biggest things, the lowest one, is prevention. So when we talk about that, we talk about looking at these degree days. So our team goes out, you can get on any website and look at the degree days in your area, and specifically on weed science websites, you can see when those weeds are going to germinate. So we'll go out and we'll actually put down mulch at that time. Our consulting clients, we actually build agronomic plans for the entire year based on these degree days. We always are checking them, and they change a little bit, but you can actually time it just by doing that. Again, back to aerification. If you go out and you're gonna aerify when you know that degree day is gonna be, when your crab gas is gonna germinate, when your crabgrass is going to germinate, it's not going to work very well for you. You're going to have a ton of crabgrass pop no matter what you've done. All right, so we've got about 2 minutes left here. So on the soils, we talked about the soils. Dennis talked about that a little bit. It's everything about the soils. If you've got, which we have here in Southern California, poor soils, most likely it's because of the poor water quality that we're dealing with. If you try to put down a fertilizer, especially organic fertilizer, in those poor soils, you're not going to get response. Or your turf's not going to be strong enough to actually outlast those weeds. Water quality is very, very difficult, especially with reclaimed water, which here in Irvine, as Dennis knows, is really, really tough. Dennis talked about the fertigation units. These fertigation units are everything. You can bypass the soil, you can bypass all the issues with fertigation units. Basic principles like going out and actually sharpening your mowers, sharpening that reduces disease, that reduces water usage. Proper water management is huge, and rotation. Your team needs to be out looking, rotating through that maintenance and going out and making sure that they're going through and patrolling. If you're patrolling, you're going to see those weeds or those issues way ahead of time. Proposition 25B, we talked about a little bit. Proposition 25B, these actually don't require an EPA registration number. They don't require an EPA registration number because there's a list of 31 natural ingredients in these chemicals. So Proposition 25B, they're great products. All of our products are based on Proposition 25B. They're called minimum risk pesticides. These are the certification companies that do certification for pesticides. Kind of jumping through here. As you all know, each one of the EPA registered products have a caution, warning, or danger label. And many of the certified organic herbicides actually have warning or danger labels. So in summary, organic is a systematic approach. You must know your pest and plant material. Scouting and planning is key. Educate your teams and clients and use organic chemistries as your final solution. So we didn't get to talk a whole lot about it, but liability. The liability to your employees, the liability to your HOAs are huge. All those insurers out there need to think about that. It only takes one case. It only takes one workers' comp. Go organic. Hopefully you all are going to help us do that. We're super excited about it. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you, Tom, so much. We're going to have a 5-minute break before we get into Chip Osborne's presentation, which will continue for the rest of our program today. See you back in 5. Thank you for your tech support help, Chip. Sorry about that.
You'll be at the fairgrounds tomorrow, right?
Do what?
You'll be at the fairgrounds tomorrow?
I will, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Talking about the same thing?
In much more detail. Yeah, there's going to be like a high-level overview, and then tomorrow's going to be really down into detail.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay,
Yeah, I was
so-
outside talking to, it's like, it's the craziest thing. I said, I'm talking to 3 people. Rick Morris from the school district, remember him originally, who's now in Yorba Linda, and he said he's going to get me over there.
Hey.
Steve Hagee, who was Kim's technical advisor and product guy like 2 people ago, that couldn't get away from it fast enough. And Eric from Tustin, who she worked with initially.
Is he an advocate or?
No, city park manager. And he said, I'm sorry we had to meet under such bad circumstances, it's all different now. And so the three of them all looked at me and said, and they all looked at me and said, so how are you recovering from, I said, the fiasco? And he said, that's a great way to put it. It's amazing, all these guys are all basically saying.
Well, come on, like you can't kill the biggest thing.
She said, she leaned over, she said, have you heard any blowback from Kim about this? And I said, well, not directly, but we've heard that she's reached out, to people around here, not too complimentary about us. And she said,
Yep. Way to make friends. Yeah, like the opposite of relationship building, whatever that is.
well, that's exactly what the guys out there said. It's a shame that, building relationships and moving this forward, and that, one person can do so much damage.